Our final reading is from Matthew chapter 12, verses 1 to 12. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose, and we have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people, his chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem, in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route.
Great, thank you, Jack. So the first set of visitors that we've had, they were the shepherds, and the second set of visitors, they had travelled from a long way. They came to see this newborn baby. Some people think that there might have been three of them. Does anyone know who these visitors were? No one. No one knows who these visitors were. Well, should we pack up and go home then? Come on, someone shout out. Who were these visitors? The wise men, and we sometimes call them the Magi. So these visitors had come from a long way to visit Jesus quite a while after he was born. They turned up on the scene, and they wanted to see the baby Jesus. They wanted to visit him. Now, it's important if you're going to visit someone, make a mental note of this if you're ever going to visit someone over Christmas. You need to get the right address, don't you? Now, someone in our family made that mistake recently. They had ordered something off the internet and they put the wrong address in. And so we had to go knocking on some stranger's door asking if they had the parcels for the delivery. Thankfully, the people were very kind and had saved the parcels for us. And so we got what we needed. But the wise men, the Magi, they got the wrong address. Perhaps they weren't so wise after all. But you can't really blame them. They turned up at Jerusalem. And if you knew you were going to visit a baby king, you would expect that baby to be born in the palace in Jerusalem. So that's why they turned up at Jerusalem asking about this king. But the king who actually lived there, that actually disturbed him, and that's another story. But they eventually worked out, as they read what had been written hundreds, thousands of years before, they worked out that the newborn king was to be born in Bethlehem. And the star that they were following confirmed this, as it indicated to them that they needed to go the extra 6 miles from Jerusalem to Bethlehem and go and visit the newborn Jesus, the child Jesus. Now, Matthew there, as we've read, he records what happened when these Magi actually saw Jesus. It tells us that they bowed down and worshipped him. Now, to worship someone is to recognize that they are far greater than you are. In fact, worship is what we ought to reserve for God alone. But these men who had traveled a long way, these men who were probably very old at this time, they recognized that this little toddler, this little baby, was worth worshipping. They recognized that this baby was greater than they were. And then they showed their worship of Jesus through the free gifts that they gave to Jesus. Can anyone remember what the free gifts were? Tyrion? Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now, the gold there doesn't look very shiny, but I assure you it is gold. And then we got frankincense and myrrh on there as well. These were the gifts that were given to the child Jesus. Now, gold is something you often find in temples and in palaces, the places of gods and of kings. And so it seems like these magi were recognizing that Jesus was some sort of divine king, some sort of God-sent king to bring God's rule on the earth, which is what the Bible tells us Jesus was, who he was, that he was God, come and born into humanity to bring God's rule on the earth. Frankincense, that was used in the temple worship. That was used in the sacrifices of the priests in order to offer their sacrifices to God. And a priest's role was to connect people with God, to go between God and humans and join them together, which they did through the sacrifices that they made. So by Jesus being given frankincense, it shows that he himself was going to be the sacrifice that was the one that would join God and humans back together. And then you've got myrrh, and perhaps this was the most puzzling of all of them, because myrrh was what you would use when people had died to make the bodies not smell too bad in that society. A little bit gruesome, forgive me for that. But by Jesus being given the present of myrrh, it almost indicated in advance how he would be the sacrifice, how he would be the one who lays down his life in order to join humans and God back together again, bringing about forgiveness for our sins. And so that's what the free gifts indicated. That was their way of worshiping Jesus, by recognizing who Jesus is and what he has come to do in giving his life so that we could know God. Now, if Jesus has done all of this, and this is who Jesus is, and he has given his life so that we could know God, so that we could be restored to our original purpose, which is to know God, love him, follow his ways, and worship him, if Jesus has done all of this, then he deserves our worship. He deserves the worship of humankind. He doesn't just deserve our worship at Christmas time. He doesn't just deserve our worship whenever we can make it on a Sunday to gather as a church. He deserves worship that is the whole of our lives given over to God, to show our love for him and our desire to follow him with the whole of our lives. That is what true worship really looks like. That is what worship of Jesus really looks like.